Okay, we are going to get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Will Cooper. I am a SharePoint Solutions developer, and we're going to be taking a look at forms options as it relates to SharePoint. We're going to be doing a comparison and trying to give some information so you are aware of how you can set up forms in SharePoint. My background is with the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, and I do a lot of things related to SharePoint. I have a YouTube channel called SharePoint Smart, and additional to that work, I have a SharePoint product called SharePoint Dashboards, which is something that can work in addition to what we're going to talk about some today, which is Ultimate Forms. At Infowise, we're about making things simple and easy, and that's going to be a central theme in what we talk about today. And another key thing is we're wanting to continuously improve our tools, so we're always adding features and functions to make things better and better allow you to build solutions in SharePoint. This is a software that you can add to your SharePoint environment. It appears directly in SharePoint. You don't have to load any external tools or anything like that. And a very key part about our tools is that you do not have to do any code, no programming required. I am recording this. I'll post a link to a YouTube recording later, which you can access so you don't feel like you have to take notes. You can rewatch this or share this with your colleagues. After the main presentation, I am going to give you some information about SharePoint dashboards. So if you want to stick around and learn about those tools, that'll be a few extra minutes after our main presentation. Ultimate Forms is available both for Microsoft 365 and also for on-premise SharePoint. So regardless of which SharePoint environment you use, you can have access to the tools that we're going to be taking a look at today. I should comment, I absolutely want your feedback and communication, and the way you can do that during our webinar is through the Q&A section. Please be patient. If I'm not able to answer your question right away, I will pause later and check through your questions and try to do my best to answer. So please use that if you have any questions or things that come up as I'm presenting. So here we have a diagram showing some different options as it relates to building forms in SharePoint. So Microsoft has a product called Microsoft Forms, which looks very similar to something that existed before that, which is Google Forms. And I think in many ways it mirrors that functionality. It's a very simple, easy to use, lightweight form building tool. And that's great if you just have a basic form that you need to put out. But if we need something that's dynamic, if we have any kind of custom requirements in terms of how we need the form to work, that's not going to be able to help us out because it doesn't allow for that kind of customization. SharePoint itself, of course, allows you to create lists, and it has its own side panel form that opens up. And that's also basic. We can control the order of the fields, and all of us are generally familiar with this. Like Microsoft Forms, we don't have the ability to do any kind of dynamic functionality. It's really just for basic use. So these form options are on one end of the spectrum, and these are simple. They're easy to use. Anybody can do it. But very limited with the functionality. And of course, we don't have to do any coding for those type of forms. All right, on the very opposite side of things, we have Power Apps. Power Apps is provided by Microsoft as a part of Microsoft 365, and it is a developer environment. It's built for programmers, and programming is a major part of their platform in all parts of the interface. It does have the ability to accommodate complex business requirements. You can build dynamic forms and you can build sophisticated solutions, but it's very much a custom development environment for developers to do programming to build that. And for a very large organization, you may have a dedicated SharePoint developer and they might use a tool like this. It is not a fast, efficient form building tool in any way. So we have this great divide. We need options to build forms, but we don't have the ability to do dynamic forms without having, to be a SharePoint developer, that type of thing. And that's really where Ultimate Forms is fantastic. And that's what I'm going to focus on today. I'm going to talk to you about how you have the ability to do dynamic forms, build custom functionality without having to do any programming at all. And we're going to do a side-by-side comparison to demonstrate some of that. So if you are thinking about options and you're looking for a way to do custom forms and you've tried using Power Apps and you're looking for something that is a better option that's not going to be so frustrating to work with and not require programming, that's what we're going to talk about. So here's some screenshots. Here's the out-of-the-box SharePoint form. There's that side panel form that opens up. Very plain vanilla. It works for basic purposes, but as I say, really no customization options to speak of. It's not dynamic in any way. Here is the Power Apps developed form for a SharePoint list, also opening in the side panel. And we do have customization options, but we're going to have to do programming to get any of that dynamic functionality. Here is the option we're comparing to, which is Ultimate Forms. This is provided by our organization, and this is an add-in that you can get for SharePoint and build full-page custom forms and be able to do it without doing any programming or coding. Here's an example which to me really encapsulates the difference when comparing between these two different development platforms, those being Power Apps and Ultimate Forms. On the left, you see the code snippet that is required if you want to accomplish what I consider to be a very common requirement for a form, that being default the name of the current user into a people field. Well, there's no easier way to do it in Power Apps. You have to put in this custom code snippet. It's hard to read, it's hard to understand, and it's frustrating that you have to do this kind of programming just to accomplish a basic requirement in a form. On the right, you can see what is required in Ultimate Forms. A very easy to understand rule where we just reference a function for the current user. So literally, I just have the words current user in square brackets. I check the box that says I want that to happen in the new form, and I'm done. A much simpler process, no programming required. You can imagine that this scenario repeats. This is a basic requirement in a dynamic form. Imagine the situations that you get into with more complex business requirements. This is a screenshot from Power Apps. We're going to open that up in a second. The thing that you want to realize is Power Apps is all about coding. Everywhere you look in the interface, you're going to see coding references. You're going to see nested code snippets and statements, dynamic property references. Everything is coding in the Power Apps interface. Let's take a step back and think about key concepts for form building. What do we need to have to be successful building forms in SharePoint? Of course, the thing that we're going to keep talking about today is it's really important that you don't have to do programming. We need to have the ability to do easy configuration updates. We want a drag and drop style interface because that's intuitive. We want to be able to drag form elements where we want them to appear on the form. The design of the form in terms of the colors, the look and feel, and how things are laid out, that should also be easily configurable without code. We want to be able to add rules and settings to make that form dynamic, and that's where Ultimate Forms really shines. Multi-column layouts are very typical in forms. The out-of-the-box SharePoint form and Power Apps form that I showed you just are single column layout. In Ultimate Forms, I'm going to show you the container system that allows you to do those multi-column layouts very easily. We want to have a full page layout so we can use the SharePoint page, and that should also have responsive design. And that means that when I make a form in SharePoint, I want it to look good on a regular computer screen, but also I like for it to automatically adapt to mobile devices. So there are going to be forms and processes in your organization where people are on the go and they need to do something like submit an expense report on the go using their mobile phone. So these forms should automatically adapt for mobile devices. The overall platform needs to be simple and intuitive to use, but it also needs depth. And that's what Ultimate Forms brings to the table. So you can have lots of people in your organization building forms, but for those of you who are very experienced with SharePoint and have more in-depth knowledge, you're going to be able to dig deeper and tap into advanced functionality using the same toolkit. So those are important requirements in order to be successful at building forms for SharePoint. All right, so we're going to do a head-to-head comparison and look at these side by side. In fact, we're going to show the same form in 3 different situations. So the first one we can cover very quickly. This is the out-of-the-box SharePoint form, and we're all very familiar with this. We add a record, the side panel opens up, and we just work our way down the list, fill out the fields. And then of course we can use the SharePoint field settings to indicate whether fields are required or not. As I describe it, very plain vanilla, really no customization happening here at all. So that's your regular out-of-the-box SharePoint form that happens automatically with your SharePoint list. All right, so let's look at Power Apps. We have a form I've created here for help requests to go to our IT department, and this is our Power Apps form. It opens in a similar manner. It's going to open with the side panel form, and you can see we've got a vertical layout going on. And right away, I can notice some weird things going on. I've got a double scroll bar going, and it doesn't do anything on its own automatically in terms of, looking nice, having a multi-column layout. It's not really providing a better user experience than the out-of-the-box SharePoint form. This is just generally what we get initially. Now I have the ability to adjust some of those settings if I want to, but it's not really bringing much to the table to me initially when I'm doing my form layout. In order to build those forms, I have to open a separate application. I have to go outside of SharePoint into Power Apps Studio. Here we are. So for many organizations, Power Apps sounds great because it's provided as a part of Microsoft 365. It seems like a great opportunity because you're not having to pay for additional tools, and it just seems like a situation where you should be able to just learn how to use this tool set and take advantage of it, and you'll be able to do all your custom forms. And that is definitely not the situation because of the programming requirement, the fact that you truly need to be a developer in order to build forms. And even as a developer, it is very time consuming. I know I've spent a lot of time working on this, and it's very time consuming, frustrating. So even with the training experience, it is not a fast, efficient form builder. So in my form, if you take a look, one of the scenarios that I mentioned, I wanted my form to default the request to buy to the current user. In order to set up that functionality, I had to unlock the card, go into advanced, and I have to go to all these custom properties. And then if you go into these boxes, you can see that everything is all code snippets. So I have to make these updates, and generally I have to do a lot of searching around and finding code examples to do this. It's very granular and intricate, The location of elements on the cards use references that are not necessarily so easy to understand. It's just not user-friendly to work with. So it's powerful, but this is like working in Visual Studio. We're doing programming, we're doing custom developments. If I need to relocate elements, I can move them around, but I'm doing it in a very granular manner by applying properties in here and specifying things like RGB color values and locations in the form to very precise pixel level elements. Not a very pleasant experience, not in my opinion. The code snippet I put in my PowerPoint presentation, here it is. This is showing what you have to do to default the user. And this really is indicative of your experience in terms of trying to accommodate this custom functionality. So Power Apps is truly a struggle, not only for people who are not developers, but even for those of us who have done a lot of programming and have SharePoint experience. So you need a better path. Okay, so let's look at Ultimate Forms as a comparison. This, as you can tell, is a very different looking form immediately when I start building it. And how is it that we're able to create a form that has this dynamic functionality without having to do programming? Let's go into the form designer and take a look, and I'll try to demonstrate to you how some of this functionality is set up without having to do all the coding that's required with Power Apps. This app is added to SharePoint. Once you've done that, it's available for you to build any number of forms that you want. After this presentation, what I want you to know is you have complete access to these tools to try this out. Our trial software runs for 30 days. It is the entire functionality of our toolkit. So you don't have to take my word for it or before making a decision on whether to get these tools. You can download this, share this with your other team members, go into Form Designer and build the same form. I should say also, I'm going to add this as a downloadable template, which you can download later today, the exact form that I'm showing right now. So here I am in Ultimate Forms Form Designer, and this is a dramatically different interface. You'll notice that I'm not seeing programming references around this interface at all, and we saw that all over the place with Power Apps. Uses a container system, so I can drag these boxes in here, and that's how I can do my multi-column layouts. So as an example, I have this set to 3 columns. You can see how it immediately adapts. What you see is what you get. And I can easily drag my fields out onto the form and move them around however I need to. Maybe I want to move category over. I just drag and drop it. I'm not going through that granular list of properties on the side. Remember that scenario with the requested by? We want that to default. I told you that was easy, and it truly is. All I had to do was add this simple rule by clicking the Add New Rule, and I gave it a description. I said I just need this to default to the current user. And I just clicked in this box, and we have a handy list of functions, and I clicked current user. I say that I just want that to happen on the new form, and I'm done. That's all that I had to do. I didn't have to go digging or searching how to do this requirement. It's just that easy to set that up. And I can apply rules to other fields as well. As an example, I want this due date to automatically be set to a week from the current date. So here's another rule that demonstrates how simple that is and how I'm able to do it with no programming. I simply selected dynamic rule. I referenced this today function, and I just said +7. So just add 7 days to my date for me. Go ahead and do that for me on the new form. And that's all there was to it. I can also dynamically show and hide parts of the form according to rules. And that's also very easy to do. So these sections under the second tab, Help Team Notes, those are set up to show just for our help desk team. So I'm able to add a permissions rule in this case. for my demonstration, I just set it to me, but you can reference a SharePoint group, and I can indicate whether a field or a section is readable, writable, or hidden. I just pick a radio button, and then I just said, if it's me, I want this writable. If it's not, then it will not show. And I have the same role here. So being able to show and hide form sections based on user role is really important. You want to make sure that's easy to do. The look and feel of the form is very easy to change. I can apply styles rules, and they're all through configuration, and it's very intuitive. So I have this main container here, and if I want to do a different background color, I can just pick, and what you see is what you get. So I select a light blue here, hit save, and immediately you can see the form change. I can also do things like adjust the borders. I have a theme here. I picked rounded shadow. I can do, whatever I want. And whenever I make those changes, it just adjusts real time in the form. Notice the actual form itself automatically is already much more intuitive and easier to use. It has drag and drop fields here for a screenshot for this help request, and also for attachments. Whenever I'm done making my updates, I can just click publish, and that updates for me automatically, and it's just that easy. I don't have to do any programming in this at all. Get to my next browser tab. Let's kind of run through a list real quick. This is a PDF which I'll link under the video later. This is a comparison between what it takes to build forms with different features, comparing those two products. These bubbles that you see, it's showing, whether this is just an easy thing that you can set, whether it's challenging to set that up, or whether you're going to do programming. And comparing side by side, you can tell that there is a massive difference. Every time you're seeing these red bubbles in Power Apps, it's programming. If you want to do tab forms, you got to invent that yourself. You got to code it up from scratch and do programming. There is no tab control in Power Apps. If you want to have expanding accordion sections, repeating tables, any of these types of things, if you want to do a signature field, you're going to be doing a lot of programming. You've got to be a developer to figure this out. It's going to be time consuming, and it gets very difficult. So this ends up being not free to your organization. It ends up being very expensive in terms of development hours, programming and learning. And you now have a bottleneck because only a select person or couple of people in your organization have the skill set to even be able to update and develop those forms. In comparison, on the Ultimate Forms side, this is accessible to any of your users that have just basic SharePoint knowledge. So now, instead of this bottleneck where you have those one or two developers in your organization with a skill set and ability to develop or update forms, you can now spread that out. You can have leaders in different departments taking ownership of their own forms, making their own updates, and with some basic training, they can figure out how to take advantage of this. So now everybody is taking advantage of the form building instead of just a couple of people in your IT group. This information is on our site. We have a couple of PDFs there that talk about this topic, comparing Ultimate Forms to Power Apps. So let's talk a little bit about next steps in terms of how you can explore this and pursue options. I mentioned that you should try these tools. You can go into our form builder. In fact, we have a free training. It's called Kickstart Training. And you can follow along in those steps, and it'll show you exactly what to do. If you go into our resources under training, there's a link to that. Or you can go in our tutorial section, and there's actually a step-by-step guide. It's the very first section in our training. So once you've downloaded these tools, I hope you'll go through that. That'll give you some basic practice so you can get your feet wet. In order to install, your admin, your SharePoint admin should help you with this. They can go through the install, click on the blue button on the right. It's a very simple process. And this will allow you to explore and do this form building and try it out for yourself. So I really recommend those steps. Our pricing information is on the site. It's based on the number of users interacting with your forms, and you can sign up for subscription so that you guys can use this ongoing. A major benefit also that's not in Power Apps is that we include hundreds of templates. So in addition to what I'm showing you, let me make sure I don't save anything I don't mean to. If you go into our settings screen in the solution catalog, you can see that says 337. We have lots and lots of examples of pre-built solutions that you can download to your SharePoint site, and you can start from there. So you can make adjustments to those forms, that type of thing. In fact, we do these webinars each month, and we always upload a template and make that available. So if you'll go into our solution catalog after you install the trial, you can browse through these, and it's very easy to download that solution. You can just go through here and click install. It'll download all the lists and configuration to your site, and you can get running with it very quickly. So I definitely recommend that you take a look at that. All right, let me pause for a second. I want to make sure that I'm covering questions, because I confess I haven't looked at the questions yet, but I want to make sure I answer that. All right, so I'm looking now. Give me 1 second. There's a question about making sure forms are 508 compliant. I think you kind of need to do your due diligence. I'm not immediately savvy to some of those requirements. That would be something where if you'll contact us after the webinar, I can talk to you a little bit more about that. That's a good question. There's a question about licensing structure. The cost is based on number of users in the form. So if you go into the Infowise site and click on pricing, it'll tell you how that works. You need to determine how many users in your organization are going to interact with the form. So basically it's a cost per user per month. The cost changes, based on volume licensing, but typically for our customers, they pay a subscription fee each year, and you just keep that going, and that gives you access to the tools. One thing that's really fantastic is that's the only pricing variable, meaning if you have 100 forms or you do 1,000 forms, it doesn't change your pricing with Infowise at all. In other words, once you have the tool set, effectively it's unlimited. You can build as many forms and workflows, print templates, whatever it is you're building, you can just use our tools as far as you can. There was another conversation about licensing being based on number of users, and basically anybody who's going to be using the forms you build. So there's no distinction as far as developer licenses or anything like that. Essentially, you figure out how many people are going to be, adding records based on these forms you're going to build or updating. Those are all users. You just need to get your total count, and that's what you need to purchase. You can, of course, also adjust that. We have a license management tool. So for some organizations that I work with, they may start with an initial allocation of licenses, and naturally you can adjust that and add to that later as your development efforts proceed and you do more things there. So good question. Okay, and what I want to tell you is we're glad to have a one-on-one conversation with you, and that's really your best bet. So the trial is the most important thing. So that's the thing you want to make your number one priority, to download that, because that's where you're going to make your decision. Once you use the form building tool, you can try that out and you can make that direct comparison that I was just making. And you should begin to immediately see the difference between the struggle of working with Power Apps compared to using our form designer tool. You're going to find that there's a dramatic difference. And I would expect, if you're like me, you're going to see that it's much easier and much better, and you'll decide that this is the way that you want to build your custom forms in SharePoint. And the way you can get a hold of us, we have a sign up for request a demo, and that will let us schedule a web meeting with you, and we can talk with you one-on-one, because every organization is a little bit different. And we have some flexibility as far as how we do our pricing. And so we'll make sure that we give you a quote and make sure you know what the what you would need to budget if you were to consider adopting the tools. And then also, if you have a specific project that you're working on and you have questions about how to accommodate that project, we can get into the details of that as well. So I really recommend that you sign up for that, and we'll be happy to do a web meeting with you. There's a question about what happens if licensing is exceeded. You could picture just like a glass of water. If you have 50 licenses and 50 different users go into the forums, you're good to go. When user 51 goes in there, they're just going to get a message that gives them an error warning, basically, because it goes over the count. So it just will not allow access if you go over that. It has nothing to do with simultaneous use at all. If I access a form, I'm on the user list and I stay on the user list. So it's the total number of users that need to access your form over time. Okay, so I'm going to pivot. You guys may continue to hit me up with questions about Ultimate Forms and Form Designer. And we're going to now talk about SharePoint dashboards. This is an additional tool separate from Ultimate Forms, which you can use in addition to Ultimate Forms. And this allows you to do visual data management. So if you're interested in having indicators and making your SharePoint dashboards look nice, this is what this site is all about. This is a tool that allows you to do custom column formatting and view formatting in your SharePoint lists. There's a variety of things that you can add. Like Ultimate Forms, you can try this for free. There's a free sign up, which will give you access to 21 of these templates, and that will help you see how this tool works. So you can get a little bit of practice, you can interact with it and get an idea of how easy it is to work with. And then if you like that, you can go on and access more templates. There are a total of 214 templates in the site. Like Ultimate Forms, it is a subscription model. You can sign up and cancel anytime you want to. Something that's a little bit different, you only need a license for the user who is applying templates in this tool. So if it's just you applying templates in SharePoint, you only would need to get one user license. As far as getting this product, you can, go to the sign up page that gives you information about the pricing. It's a very low cost SharePoint tool, but very versatile and includes lots and lots of options for things you can add in SharePoint. You can see at the top of the page, there are a lot of charting templates. So if you like the idea of adding things like line charts, bar charts, pie charts, whatever those kind of indicators are, this includes many templates like that. There's lots of custom buttons and indicators, image formatting, you name it. It's really all over the board. You can just browse through these options. Like Ultimate Forms, the configuration is simple. You don't have to do any programming. You can just go to these color picker options and it shows you a preview of how it's going to look. So this is just a simple one that turns a yes, no field into an interactive checkbox in your SharePoint list. So I hope that's something you guys will check out. Again, it's very easy to get to this. You can go to SharePointDashboards.com, and if you click Get Started and then sign up, there is a free option. All you need to do is provide your name and email. That'll give you access to these 21 templates that are free, and you can get out the door and start practicing with those and see how that works. This is specifically for SharePoint Online and also SharePoint Subscription Edition if you want to try that. So I hope that's something that you guys will check out. It gives you lots of options and it's very affordable. There's a question about Ultimate Forms. Does the form run 100% in my tenant? No. Any SharePoint add-in software for SharePoint Online necessarily has to communicate with third-party servers because Microsoft controls your environment. We use our servers to store configuration data in terms of how the form is displayed. What does always stay in your environment is your SharePoint list data. So if you have data security concerns, we have a page that explains that information to you, but necessarily we have to do things like store configuration data because there is a wide amount of functionality provided by Ultimate Forms that has to do with email templates and actions, form configuration, you name it, that necessarily is stored in configuration data on our server. There's a question about calendar overlays. Yes, I'm really glad you asked about that. Ultimate Forms does include a calendar template option. In our design screen, it's under our event calendars. I don't have one readily available to show you, but I will tell you that the calendar web part that's a part of our tools is a huge improvement over the basic out-of-the-box SharePoint calendar. So that's something you can try out for yourself when you install the trial software. Great question, Ida. Thank you. All right, that concludes our main presentation. I really appreciate the questions and feedback. I'm going to stay on for a while, but I am going to stop our recording. So if you do have questions, stick around. I'm going to answer those questions. But let me go ahead and make sure I